We have a panel now for 20 minutes with some of our speakers for today. So if you're joining the panel, please take a seat now. The purpose of the panel is to ask general questions. In relation to the day and themes in the day. It's not to ask a specific speaker, why did you do something very geeky and specific, or why didn't you? So, has anyone got any questions?
Very little of what you've talked about today is addressed. I'm privileged to have someone like Duncan Baker-Brown tutoring on my course. But yeah, the vast majority, it leaves me feeling sort of empty and thinking, oh, I don't want to be an architect if this is what architects do. I don't know. It's sort of, I sort of think, where do you go from there? But in terms of, I think I've learned more about people and the future, or realised more about people in the future on this course than I have about design. But I still am intrigued by design. So yeah, is that a question?
Well, maybe a statement with some a request for comments, I guess, rather than a question. But yes, any advice, any thoughts on that?
Where are you studying? Oops. I think it is pretty normal in most... Is this on? I can't tell. Yeah, I think it is pretty normal in most universities. So, I get asked to go into a couple of universities in London to talk about sustainable water, and loads of carbon techs, and they have like one lecture in the year from me for an hour and a half about that. And that's the only time, virtually, they even talk about water, let alone sustainable water solutions. I just think that, like you're a student, you don't have to just follow what the course is teaching you. Go out and look at wider things, and there's a lot of stuff out there that you can explore. Yeah, and then you can bring that into your designs as well. Yeah.
We get taught to sort of qualify ourselves from the existing framework. That is the industry.
Probably the people behind can't hear your comments, but has anyone else got anything to add to that? Other than there's some great people, great architects out there?
I don't think that's really the point. I think the tradition in education, in architectural education, when it comes to these issues, is sometime in second year you do your sustainable project or your ecological project, because it's actually required by the RIBA. You're actually supposed to be delivering this stuff. And it's very much seen as a tick box exercise of you do that in second year, and then in third year you get back to the real world and developing super green skyscrapers or whatever they are. And it's really up to you to address this, go back and figure out what it is you're supposed to be being taught. There's been a long tradition which is that ecological architecture and sustainable architecture has been seen as bad architecture. It's been seen as, if you care about the environment, it's because you're trying to hide from something, the fact that you're not a good architect. So it's just traditionally had a really bad press. And I would recommend you to go and dig out some books on really good sustainable buildings and stuff them on your desk and in front of your tutors and go, no, actually, I can do good sustainable architecture. It's been done before, and I'm going to do it now. But it's getting over this prejudice and this assumption that it's weak architecture as opposed to responsible architecture. And the point is, if you're going to be a sustainable architect, it's got to be really good. You can't do it as hiding. You've got to do really good architecture.
I would also say, we live in a site. I'm not a typical planner, but I need to understand how the planning system works in order to engage with it, because the parallel universe in which everything is okay and nice doesn't exist. This one does. I have to get into this one. You're right, but that's the same for all professions. All professions need their pioneers, their outliers. It's just a question of whether you see yourself as wanting to be an architect, or you see yourself as wanting within the field of architecture to connect with a lot of other stuff. You know, I'm not a normal planner because I know about a lot of other stuff. And we need people who step outside the silos and join things up, basically. So, I mean, if you're having these doubts, great.
Shall I take another question? Anyone got another question or a question? No one got a question? Oh, yes.
Do you think there's some difference between a sort of England attitude? Apparently Wales and Scotland seem to be far more open to new ideas in this field, anyway, compared to the continent, or is the grass greener on the other side of the fence? It always seems as if Germany, even France, Italy, Scandinavia, they seem to have these amazing projects. And we seem to struggle and fight and grind along like, I mean, what is it with us? Or is that just an illusion? Are they just as bad?
It's cool to be green in Scandinavia. It's cool to be green in Germany. The tradition here is that it's really not that cool to care. And I think the fact that it's considered to be important means there has been much more movement in Scandinavia. And there are some fabulous, fabulous projects. We saw the one in Vauban, Freiburg, Tübingen. There's lots of stuff in Holland. It's not embedded in policy, but there are, I would say, a substantial number of really, really good projects where you would want to live. Substantially more than you would see perhaps in England or in Scotland.
Okay, and I'd just like to make a little point about Brexit. So basically, my position is that the EU has always very, very much gone out and fought for the environment, and it's embedded that in policies. And just in terms of water, I was talking about you guys putting your poo into the sea. Well, the EU banned that back and said by 1990 that shouldn't happen in any member at the time of the EU. And then as other countries came in, they were told, yeah, you can join, but you can't do this with your raw sewage. And, Britain has always thought, we don't want everyone telling us what to do, blah, 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 blah. And, and I think we have an island mentality. Very much. We are an island. We've never been, conquered. That's not true, but, And on the continent, the people have to sort of get along much better. And I think for all of these reasons is why we just struggle to say, environmentalism isn't a good thing. And it's just been forced upon us by Europe. And the industry and the British government fought so hard against this whole thing about protecting our rivers and our seas from raw sewage. I think that's just a small little snapshot of what I think.
From my experience, I don't know much about Europe and I've not lived there, but I feel like the world that I've grown up in here is predominantly fairly cynical, our society, and pessimistic. If you come up with a wild, crazy, sort of idealistic idea, it's generally doesn't get that enthusiastic a reception when you talk to, say the big worlds of planning or architecture, as you guys have said. Just from my experience, just as an individual, even if you don't know anything about anything, just to have a little bit of hope or idealism or enthusiasm or a bit of optimism, a smile for people, and those things, they seem to make a huge, huge difference around us and really inspire people.
I just whispered to Simon that this is kind of like, it's turning to group therapy.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, so we live in a neoliberal society now. It's not very nice. However, given that the most sustainable thing you can do is walk under the next bus, but you have a self-interest in staying alive, then use the fact that you're alive to do better things than have. Well, it is. I'm sorry, we're all just...
Well, I wasn't going to tell the paedophiles.
Yeah, we're all feeling quite relaxed with each other. It's good. That there are still, you know, it's my argument about the 5% of people in the UK want to live in a much more ecologically sustainable way, but are struggling to do so. That is 3.5 million people. That's good enough for the rest of my life. You know, that's what I'm working on. And most of them are quite nice as well. So I know it's difficult, but if you look for the authorities to give you the space in which to do this innovative and more sustainable stuff, you'll just wait forever. You have to go and try and make it happen for yourself. And two things. The planning system under the Tories is actually more deregulated than it's ever been, and that, as well as letting a lot of nasty through, that also creates space for good stuff to come through. Brexit, every time I mention it, my heart sort of freezes a bit more. I hate it, but maybe within the chaos that will ensue, again, we will have more need to fall back on trying new stuff, because it's probably going to be quite bad. So, I don't know, it's, you know, your chance to move to the rest of Europe is closing off pretty fast. Maybe if you want to go and live in Portugal, you better get on with it.
Could I offer an alternative to the most sustainable thing you could do is jump under a bus?
Yes, please do.
David Fleming's book, Lean Logic, was published in the autumn. I found that very inspiring. He says, if you're concerned about the state of the future, the best thing you could do is join a choir. You know, let's get together and do something beautiful.
Okay, and another question.
Well, first of all, the information I got today were more than I expected. And it's not only about the knowledge that you guys brought, but you talk from your heart. And that says a lot. Now, my question comes because I would say 50% of the wealth in this world is owned by 1% of the population, right? But I read somewhere that wealth, or a wealthy person is not who has the most money, is the one who needs the less. And because you are in that area of green living, self-sustainability, what about the third world countries who are the people who need the most and who have the less? And these are natural resources that even kids can do. And how do you see this coming to the people who really, really need it? And it will make this world a little bit more balanced. Do you have anything to share about that?
You're looking at me. That's more of a challenge than a question, isn't it? There's a unifying point here that, you know, the West, we live massively outside of our entitled amount of the world's capacity. And even around environmental footprinting, I find it quite, no offence, Bill, but, you know, it's all a bit cold, isn't it? It's a bit joyless. It's about, like, how little you can have. But because the dominant model here is that in order to be happy, you have to have more. All right. But, I mean, where I was going, and it's a lame answer, but it's difficult, isn't it? Is that, you know, the fundamental point about things like ecological footprinting, which is how the Welsh stuff works, and they came up with it, I think, without really realising what they were doing, is that it's got fairness at its heart, which means that if we were to live in a demonstrably sustainable way, the problem would sort itself out, because we wouldn't be taking more of our fair share of the Earth's resources. That doesn't, though, duck the point that we've already taken way more than our fair share of the Earth's resources. So I don't really have an answer to your question, because it's not something I've thought about, but I hope my other panel members are bursting with one.
I I would like to look at it from a point of view of not the resources that we're using, but the other end of the telescope, which is the toxicity that we're creating. And unfortunately, that's not bounded. That actually, we are creating an immense global toxicity, which the third world is not only poor, but is also suffering from in some areas to a significantly greater degree than we are. I recommend a film called Under Kastelsen to you, a Swedish film, which talks about a lot of research which has been done on toxins in general, its impact on the unborn, its impact on fish and oceans. But if you look at this whole wealth of stuff, there's one pollutant, which is CO2, which everybody talks about incessantly, and there are at least another 180,000, and their chemical cocktail effect, which are polluting everybody. So I'm afraid it's not a good picture. Nobody gets out of this well. But if we can't just see it in terms of the resources people have, because that's looking at it from one point of view. We have to also look at it in the fact of the mess that we are creating, and it's huge.
Now I'm supposed not to be answering the questions, but I'm going to chip in. I think you showed an interesting graph that relates to this. The myth that the more money, more stuff we have, the happier we get. Mm-hmm. There is a level of getting people out of grinding poverty, that more stuff does make people happier. But actually, after that, it is a myth, and that's one of the myths that we should challenge, that we need more stuff to be happy. And what comes to my mind is the work of the now sadly deceased Hans Rosling. Has everyone seen TED Talks by Hans Rosling? Or YouTube? Yeah, watch it. Statistician, Swedish health expert, really showing the stuff that makes, is about changes in population dynamics. He does one specifically around what level of wealth makes people happy as well. And that's a very interesting one to watch. And I think we need to dispel that myth. And that's good news as well.
The way I was thinking about what motivation brought you guys to do what you're doing, and try to convince big people, the big heads, let's say in the UK or in US or in Europe, that this is the way. This is not an option. This is the way. But if you go to the world, the population, where they have the middle, they're almost happy because they have almost nothing. It's way more of if you want to pick up your team, is it not something that you can be seen in the future to grab people who already have nothing, and they will be playing like kids to build things like this, and then you will be overwhelming from your team, which is the green team, the self-sustainable team, comparing with the big heads who already, oh no, this won't bring money, oh no, it's not the way, and you have to fight against rules, democratic politics, instead of going to the most of the population that you don't need to do much. You just have to train your soldiers. I don't know if you guys...
I'm aware that we are actually running out of time. Sorry, I mean, it's a huge one. Have you got one final question or a response? We've got an audience debate now.
I just wanted to bring to awareness that, at least in Latin America, there are huge movements of green architecture and natural building with world-renowned architects such as Gernot Minker from Germany, who are leading workshops and empowering people all across Latin American countries to build sustainably and to build systems that work with water, with green roofs, with vertical gardening, out of earthen structures. And I would say that it is something that is happening, and the power is definitely already going back into the hands of the people. So, yeah.
Bryn, can I have a pop at that?
Sorry?
Can I have a little... Can I
say
something?
You want to say something?
I
Go on,
I
then.
do want to say something.
Go on.
Thank you. You clarified your question quite usefully. First, the bad news. George Monbiot put a very good video online about a week ago on explaining very carefully what neoliberalism is and justifying the book he's writing now, which is about how the only response to this is, in his terms, community. That, you know, that monster of so many heads, the only way to face it down is for people to join together. Now, I want to add something to that, which is kind of my obsession, because I'm actually a geographer before I was a planner, so I'm a kind of scientist and wandered into planning thinking it was about how to make things better through geography and found out that it wasn't. But that's enough of my personal problems. Which is place. We actually live by place. We are encouraged to be less placed anymore. But the thing that has great meaning to me, and I think most people, is that we belong to somewhere. We are part of a place. And it's in places that we can achieve a lot of these differences, because places, fundamentally, they're systems, where a combination of things creates an outcome. And therefore, the answer partly, I think, to your question is that refocusing on the importance of place and identity, because if you can get all those places right, they add up to something. But also, it's a position from which to have a sense of belonging and to have something to fight for. So I'm very much a believer in place as being the way to access, you know, how do we come together? It's through belonging to a place, because that is something we intrinsically and innately plug into anyhow. And I think a lot of the problems with modern society is that you feel very placeless and very unattached.
Okay. Well, if I can draw a lot of what's been said today together in a sentence conclusion, is we already know what to do, we're not doing it, and the people who need to do it are us, not persuading other people to do it. So I think that's a positive outcome for the day. We've got to get out there and do it, whatever our part in this is. So that just leaves me to thank everyone, particularly the speakers for coming, some of them from a very long way, and Naomi, who came from London and went to Manchester today, especially to be with us. Also, to thank the volunteers that made today possible, Stella for organising it, Caroline, Sarah, Daniel, all the people who normally help to make this day run smoothly. So thank you very much for coming. Please leave your feedback, and anything more to say from Stella, Caroline, anyone else, or have I said it all?
Yep.
Yes, thank you to Chris. I also forget to thank Chris, so thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.